Hello, my fellow tarot travelers. Welcome to Peace Slowly Tarot, and I want to wish everybody a happy new year. This is a little different. Oh, here we go. Happy New Year, all. So again, this channel, which was started a year ago, is a place where reading, teaching, and learning tarot come together, and that is my mission for this channel. And so, as with any mission and with anything new, it just continues to unfold. So I just wanted to let you know, if you are new and you have not listened to any of my other readings and forecasts, that is, and if you have not read the about of my channel, and just so you know, I am still getting used to, it's so funny because I teach online. Well, I've taught online for many years, but doing it live is not completely something that I've done a lot of, like being on camera, so you just have to bear with me. I'm not going to use the camera to show myself a lot, but I thought for this first video of the new year that it would only make sense if you see the face behind the voice and behind the information. So hello, here I am. So again, Peace Slowly Tarot. My name is Lenise, and I will give you a little bit of background about how I named this channel. So I was doing a little research on my name, and every so often I do searches about my name, and there are other people in the world with the name Lenise, sometimes spelled differently, sometimes spelled the same, but still not a very common name. And over the years, people have asked me, where, oh, that's so pretty. I mean, a lot of times I get, oh, that's such a pretty name. Or I'll get asked, oh, that's very different. I've never heard that before. And then I will give them the story, which is the true story, that my mother liked Denise, and she liked Denise and Lynn. She liked those two names. But she said that they were so common at the time. So she put them together, the two names that she liked a lot, and came up with Denise. So, but I do think that there was like a metaphysical, some metaphysical reason for her to pick that name with the exact spelling, because later on we discovered that my name, and as it's exactly as it's spelled, is a peace lily plant, the beautiful white flowered peace lily plant. And it means L-Y-N-I-S-E is what my name is spelled like. So then I did some additional research on my name and came up with all kinds of, and I wrote it down somewhere. That's not the purpose of this particular presentation, but I wanted to share with you that I did not come up with the name for this channel, like just out of nowhere. And I didn't want it to be Lenise's Tarot. And so I thought, oh, well, let's use Peace Lily, because that is really what my name means. And I think that is the kind of energy that I like to generate around me in my spaces. So that's the story. So again, I want to wish everybody a happy new year. And just so if you have not listened to my videos yet, and I really never, I kind of explain this, not formally, maybe a little informally, about my approach. And so my primary tool for this channel is tarot, because it's called Peace Lily Tarot. But I like to tap into other energies when I am doing tarot readings. And so it could be the moon, it could be, it could just be one of those intuitive pokes that I like to do, intuitive poke, the universe pokes me and says, hey, or I might be tapping into something in the collective, and then I need to do a reading. Or I'm directed to look at astrology. And so, I'm also a Reiki practitioner. So I like to, any inspirations that I get from my Reiki self-practice, or maybe if I'm sending Reiki or giving Reiki to someone else, I it's just the inspirations that I get. And so there are many tools in my toolbox, but the anchor for this channel will be tarot. And also, I look at tarot and astrology. This is something, and that's why I put the pictures and on the images on the screen, because they help me remember what I want to say. For those of you who are visual. But I also like to look at tarot as, and astrology as guides. So we almost always have a choice about what moves we make, moment by moment, minute by minute, day by day, month, year, etc. But I say almost always because I do believe, sorry, I'm farther than I wanted to, that there is this almost like a divine mandate that sometimes I think things happen. I think it's like a combination. Like I think we have like 90% choice, and then there's that 10%. We may even have 95% choice, and then there's that 5% that we don't always understand, and then it exceeds understanding. But if you think about it, even if it were 80%, that's a lot of space that we have to make decisions that we have control over, right? I like to look at tarot, not so much as a fortune telling tool. People want to know, oh, is he gonna like me? Is that, are we gonna get married? That, I mean, and the fact, so the cards are not necessarily, and you can use tarot for yes or no, although many advisors advise against doing that, because yes and no is so set in stone, when everything is always in constant flux and always changing, right? And we can actually help direct the flow a little bit, but for the most part, nothing ever stays the same. So when you are using tarot is essentially giving us a snapshot, just like astrology, giving us a snapshot. Okay, what is the energy based on the energy right now? What does it look like, right? The current trajectory that we're on right now. What does this look like regarding the situation? And you'll get the information, and you can always, in a few months later, the energy might be the same. It might not be, right? I've done readings for people's, one client wanted me to do a reading on the building that she was going to put her business in. Actually, that was the first time I did a reading on a building, and I loved it so much that now I'm like, I want to do readings on people's houses and properties and buildings and land. I like that. But it isn't to say that something doesn't, shift, later on down the line. Also, you got to be careful the way you ask questions, and sometimes people get answers they don't like because of the way they ask the questions. So I like to guide people in ensuring that they ask the questions in a way that will give them feedback in a way that will get at to the root of what it is that they're really trying to figure out. Anyway, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. So for those of you who don't know, and again, like I said before, I am not going to record myself most of the time, but I thought it was only fair to at least start it now, and at least, hey, here I am. I'm not a big taking pictures, and I'm just not, that kind of a person, and posting myself all over the place. But I think it's nice when you can actually see the person who is doing the talking. So So my focus, so this is how it's going to work. I am going to do a series. So this is going to be the first in a 6-part series. I think it's 6. I mean, it could be 7. It depends on how it goes. But the way I planned it out is, um, and this is the thumbnail that you clicked on to get to this video. Um, I was thinking about New Year resolutions, and people do them all the time. I just saw an article this morning, I don't even remember what paper it was, news, excuse me, news outlet it was, but it said, don't feel bad if you've already broken your resolution. I'm thinking of myself, so it's already the 7th day of the month. And I was never a big, let's just say I'm not a fan of resolutions for myself. I am a fan of setting goals, and goals that sometimes can be adjusted, but I'm not a fan of resolutions just for the sake of creating a resolution. And so I think sometimes when we come up with these resolutions, like, we want to lose weight, we want to exercise more, we want to eat better food, I read more books, I want to take care of myself better, all of those things. And later on down the line, you get to month 3 or 4, and then it's like, boop, it's gone, right? The resolution is done, over with. You haven't even talked about it, look at that, talk about it. And so, and I think a lot of that has to do with that we never really get to the root of what it is that we're really trying to accomplish. What is it that we're really trying to change? And because many of us don't go that far into why we want to do something, then it doesn't work because we really didn't come to terms with what it is that we're really trying to change. I hope that made sense. So what I thought about was astrology and the planets. And I can't even remember the path that I was on, that it just came to me, let's look at the 3 planets that are considered the most challenging. But at the same time, there are opportunities for growth, for us to grow as people. And looking at the planets, looking at where they're positioned in our astrology charts. And I do want to say, and this is one of the reasons why I love tarot so much, is if you do not have an astrological chart because you don't know the exact time you were born or the place you were born, a lot of things we take for granted with astrology. And there are some people out there who are gifted in being able to get charts together for people who don't have that information. It takes a lot of maneuvering. But tarot can give you any information you want for the most part. You don't have to have an astrological chart to do it. So I just want to throw that out there. That being said, if you do have access to an astrology chart, where your planets are placed or where they were when you were born, like a snapshot, taking pictures, like me taking a picture of a bird flying in the air. When I take the picture, I take the picture of the bird at a particular position in the sky, right? But the bird is still flying even as I'm taking the picture. So the bird is in a different position by the time I take, the snapshot. And that is what your birth chart is essentially like. It's a snapshot of the energies at the moment you were born, where all the planets, and what houses they're in, and et cetera, where everything was at that very moment you took your first breath. And so there are 3 planets that I want to focus on in this series. And the first one is going to be Saturn. And Saturn is the one that takes the least amount of time to make a trip around the sun out of the 3 that I will be sharing with you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But yeah, so I guess the question that I have for Saturn is one of the questions we'll ask Tarot in the next video. installment, is even, what are those challenges those areas of our life that we probably are not, we don't really care to look at, but we should. And what are the gifts and opportunities present in those challenges? Because just because it's a challenge, it's how we respond to it, right? And sometimes we don't see the gift and opportunity in those challenges. And so that's what I'm going to try to get to. I'm going to help you think about, and also, and then do a reading to find out for this year, what are the challenges that we're currently facing, and what are the gifts and opportunities. And maybe after hearing, the information I'm going to share with you right now, but also during the reading, that maybe something will come up for you that will help you craft an even more powerful, actionable resolution. That being said, resolutions can always be tweaked like goals, right? You might find that you receive more information about your situation and you're like, you know what? Maybe that's not what my resolution should really say. Maybe it should really say this, right? So anyway, with that, with no further ado, this is kind of my proposed path for this presentation, but it could always change, adjust. But I like to start with a plan and then we go from there. So we're going to prepare to receive, which I kind of do already, but I just never called it that. But that's really what it is, and I'll share with you what that is. I already talked to you about my approach to astrology and tarot, or plan for 2023. Define what a transit is. What are the most challenging planets? We'll talk about Saturn. I'll talk about Saturn in my chart, then kind of share with you how you can figure out what Saturn's like in your chart, or how Saturn is expressed in your chart, I guess I should say. And then to give you a little bit of information about the next part of this series, which will be an actual reading with Saturn as the basis for the reading. So when I say prepare to receive, what I really mean is I want us to get ourselves more heart-centered and just kind of shift our mind out of survival mode into sage mode, which I like to call it. And what that means is, the survival part of the brain is where we are, we experience fear and anxiety, anger, mistrust, all of those stress, it's the part of the brain that we find ourselves operating from when we are stuck in traffic, or we're in a line, or, we're trying to get a project done, or whatever the case may be, right? The sage part of the brain is what allows us to think more clearly, to feel more peaceful, to be clear, to feel happy, content, and on all of those. So we kind of get them the sense, right? So to being prepared to receive, so let me just stop for a moment and focus on our breathing. We're not going to do it for very long, but we're going to do it for long enough so that we can get ourselves shift, help ourselves shift to that part of the brain where we can be at peace, where we can be clear, so that whatever messages come through today that is relevant to you, that you will receive and be able to do something with what you learn. So it's like everybody to just take a moment. You want to turn the camera off or pause or whatever you want to do. And I keep thinking, this is live, this is not live. I'm telling you to turn the cameras off and it's here. So anyway, so just close your eyes, sit up straight. If you can't sit up straight, just be as comfortable as you can be, whatever position you happen to be, if you're laying in bed, or, wheelchair, or whatever it is you're doing, wherever you happen to be, whatever comfort is for you is what I want you to try to get yourself into that position. And then I want you to take your attention to your breath. And you can do that by noticing the rising and falling of your chest, your stomach. And we probably did a deep breath when I said that. I know it's totally normal, but I want you to just breathe normally and just focus on the rise and fall of the chest, your stomach. To let your mind wander somewhere else, that's normal. Once you notice that your mind has gone somewhere else, pull it back to your breath. You're not doing any special kind of breathing, just noticing that you are. Take one deep breath. Out through. And then out through. Take another deep breath. And rhythm of breathing. When you're ready, open your eyes. Okay. If you need more time, you can pause this video and then when you're ready, come back on. So, the plan for 2023, again, I know that I mentioned New Year's resolution, and this came up for me. I had already like put this slide deck together, and it just dawned on me. I said, "Okay, what is the universal year number, universal number for this year?" And I did, and I said, "Oh my gosh, well, we just started a 7 year." And the 7 year, how do we do that? So it's 2023, so we add 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 2 is 7. We are in 7 year. 7 means that for us globally, we are all sharing the energy of 7. And so when I was thinking about, again, trying to get people to rethink how they approach New Year resolutions, I thought, okay, this is a 7 year. And when I was thinking about, and this was after I already decided that I wanted to focus on the 3 planets and that we would start with Saturn. And then when I was like, oh my gosh, it's a 7 universal year, let me do a little digging and remind myself all of what 7 represents. And what popped out for me, which is so much connected to this 7 year, Saturn really it is almost like a teacher, likes to teach us lessons. And these are not lessons that you can just learn overnight. These are lessons that sometimes take many years to learn, almost a lifetime to learn. But Saturn, even though Saturn is almost like, I'm going to get into the characteristics of Saturn in a little bit, but the number 7 and Saturn can be, let's just talk about 7 for a second, not Saturn, but 7 is the energy of spiritual awakening. It is the energy of self-reflection, introspection, analysis of self. And it doesn't even have to just be the self. If you are a family, looking at yourselves as a family, if it's an organization or a business, looking at oneself, revisiting your mission or your vision, if that is your, if you have a business. Countries, a country can be tapping into the energy of looking at oneself. And being that we just came out of a pandemic, particularly 2020, 2021, I find it very interesting that now that we're coming out of it, for the most part, and I guess it depends on where you live in the world too. I want to acknowledge the fact that those of you who are listening could be listening from anywhere in the world. And so depending on where you are as far as the pandemic is concerned, could look very differently than here in the United States. That being said, we still share this universal energy of seven. And so the universal energy of seven is, for me, the takeaway for me as it relates to this presentation is analysis, introspection, self-reflection, getting to the root cause of something, and dealing with issues that are that are more long term in terms of growth and development, and not so much, I want to take a different route to work. That kind of mundane type of an activity. We're talking about, if there's any trauma, for example, that has been experienced in the past. And it doesn't even have to be trauma. It could also be, depending on how old you are, it could just mean growing up and developing as a human and where you happen to be in that development. Saturn asks us to look at that, but the 7 number also asks us to look at that. And so, perfect, right? So I just wanted to make that connection for you. Also, in addition to the universal year, there's also the personal year. And again, numerology is just another tool. And although I'm not going to talk a lot about numbers in this presentation, I thought it was important to note it. And for those of you who feel like moved and led to dive into numerology even more, this is your opportunity to do it. Also, there's your personal year. So there's a universal year, which is 2023, all share 2023. But then when we get down to our specific birthdays, then there are fewer people, right? So I was born November 11th. So in order to find my personal year, as you can see on the screen, I had to add the 1s and 11s, and then I added those numbers to the 2023. And I got the master number 11, you add the 2 together and you get 2, right? So I have moved into a personal year of 2. Depending on when you were born, you add your birth to your day, the digits in your day, and the digits of what year we're in right now. And whatever number you get, that will be your personal year number. There are 1 and 2 ways to do this. Your personal year number could just be all of 2023, and you just kind of tap into that and the energy of that number for the year. The other, which I actually prefer, is that your personal year of that year starts when you have your birthday. So even though my 2023 personal year begins, my birthday is in November, so my 2 year really doesn't start until my birthday in November, which is much later. So I'm still vibrating to the 1 energy, if that makes any sense. That's a way to look at it. There are 2, you can do both. So I don't want you to think, however you're led to do it. So this is an opportunity I was going to share with you that you can figure out what your personal year is, but also be mindful of the general universal year of 7. So, as I noted before, we're going to look at the planets. We're going to look at the outer planets more so than the inner. And there are other outer planets. We're going to be looking at Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto. And the reason why they're considered the most challenging planets is, and then I want to get back to planet, and I want to make a note of planets in general. The reason why they're considered the most challenging isn't so much that they're just inherently troublesome, but again, like I mentioned before, and I'll talk a little bit about this in more detail, they just take longer to get around the sun, and so whatever lessons are associated with those planets are lessons that are they're lifelong lessons. And they're not just lifelong lessons, but they're also lessons for generations especially like Pluto, and Uranus, but and Saturn to a lesser extent, but still, takes a very long time to revolve around the sun. But I want to make a note about, because when I say challenging, I don't want people thinking, oh my goodness, Saturn is like, oh my gosh, I've got all the Saturn in my chart, Uranus and Pluto. No, that's not how I want you to look at it. Every planet is not good or bad. Every planet has light and shadow, every single one of them. And so depending on where these planets are placed in the chart will depend on how they show up, right? And having that information can be very empowering, because if you have a planet, let's say, I don't know, let's say you have Saturn in a house that deals with finances, right? Then it could mean that you'd be very good with money, that you're a very good money manager. But it could also, depending on other aspects that are involved, you could be someone who's very stingy with your money, or you're a hoarder with your money and resources. And you don't want anybody, you don't want to give it away at all. Or on the other end of it, it might be that that's an area where you have trouble with money management, and Saturn's placement is reminding you that you need to get this part of your life in order, right? And you might end up being a fabulous money manager, and you figured out how to use that shadowy aspect of your chart or of your life to benefit you and people that you come into contact with. So I hope that makes sense, because I know that there are people who have been told, oh my gosh, you have a very troubled, your chart causes me, a lot of concern. Don't say that to people. And it's the same with tarot, it's the same with numerology. I believe that these tools were put here among the many others on this planet to empower us and not to instill fear and doubt, right? Again, it puts us in that survival mode of the brain, and we're not going to be able to function, and we're not going to live a life that is full and satisfied and peaceful and happy, right? So I just wanted to make that note about the planets. So when I say most challenging, mostly because they take the longest to move around the sun, and the lessons that we need to learn are lessons that take a lot of time to learn, right? When I mentioned about the amount of time that these planets take to revolve around the sun, and there's a word for that in astrology, and it's called transit. Transits, when you hear the word transit, all it means is movement, right? If a planet is transiting, it's moving, and guess what? The planet is always transiting. Everything is always in flux and in motion, right? Remember what I said about the bird? You take a picture of the bird. Well, I got a picture of the bird in a particular spot, but the bird's still flying, right? So everything continues to move. So planets move around the sun. Every planet takes a certain number of, days to move around the sun. When you get to the outer planets like Pluto and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune and Jupiter, they take longer to revolve around the sun. And planets like Mercury and Venus and Earth take, less time to move around the sun. And so the lessons that we have to learn from Pluto and Saturn and Neptune and Uranus is they're lessons that are to be learned, skills and talents to be cultivated in the long run, right? We're not looking for the quick fixes here when we're talking about these planets, right? Planetary return is also interesting. So what a return, I just want you to think about the word return. right? So just to give you an example, my Saturn is, I shouldn't say, Saturn is in Taurus in my chart. That means Saturn was in Taurus when I took my first breath. Okay. Then Saturn moves along and goes through its normal transit, right? The Saturn return for me will be when Saturn is in Taurus again on the day that I was born. That is what the return is, right? Saturn's going to be in Taurus multiple times, but Saturn is only going to be in Taurus on November 11th at certain points of time. And I'll talk to you about that. And so that's what we call a return, when it comes right back to the same position that it was in when you took your first breath. And all the energies, the conditions, and everything are very similar because the energies are the same. But the question is, what are you going to do with that energy, right? And it's so funny. I can tell. I know someone in particular who I was thinking about their age, and I was like, oh my gosh, they've been going through their Saturn return. Either they're in the shadow of their return, they're in the midst of their return, or they're in the post-shadow period of their return. But it's like, and it's so funny because I wasn't even thinking about Saturn. I was doing a reading for them, and I said, hey, you know, now the question is, did you learn the lesson so that when you get into this new situation, that you don't find yourself in the same predicament that you were in before, right? That's a Saturnian lesson. So Saturn returns. So it takes 2.5 years to change a sign. Right now, Saturn, this very moment, is in Capricorn. He's actually about to go into Aquarius. So the last 2.5 years, Saturn's in Capricorn. And when you think about COVID and all the lockdowns and the rules and regulations, and you can't wear a mask, and you gotta wear a mask, and you gotta be 6 feet apart, and all these rules and regulations that we've had to kind of follow in such a short period of time, in such a rigid way. It really reflects the energy of Saturn and Capricorn. Those two together, but Saturn does very well in Capricorn because they both have similar energies. And so when you put them together, it's like on steroids almost, right? And remember I said there's the shadow and the light aspect, right? There's some really good things that come out of Capricorn and Saturn. But it could also, if out of control, it could create some problems. So for everybody experiences a Saturn return 2 to 3 times in their lifetime. Obviously, you're born, so wherever Saturn happens to be, comes back to that same position when you reach 27 or to 30 years old, and then again to 58 to 60 years old, and then again to 80 to 90 years old. Okay, those are your Saturn return periods. Because remember, Saturn takes 2.5 years to change a sign. So for 2.5 years, you're in a Saturn return, right? And as I noted, Saturn right now is moving from Capricorn to Aquarius. And so now this is how I do it. And you'll notice that I did this in my other videos, but I didn't have the beautiful presentation of the images. And I thought, I think I'm gonna just start doing PowerPoints. I'm not always gonna show myself, but I am gonna give you PowerPoints so that you can, for those who are visual, because a lot of times, in the past, I would say, take out your pen and pencil, put yourself a notebook, take notes on your phone, whatever you do. Well, now you have it right here in front of you. You can always pause the video. You can always go back. You can look at it. You don't have to worry about it. And you might not want to write anything down, but you just like to see it. So I want to share some notes about Saturn. And this is where, we're building the energy now of trying to get tap into what we need to know from Saturn. And then when we get to the reading segment, that energy, we're still tapping into that Centaurian energy. to get messages that will benefit us in the long run. So this is a tarot channel, and I am going to do a tarot reading. So what better way than to start with a tarot card? And when I think of Saturn, I think of the Knight of Pentacles, the Knight of Pentacles. So the Pentacles card, the Pentacles symbol is very earthy. The Pentacles card, the Pentacle symbol is also associated with the three astrological signs, Capricorn, Virgo, and Taurus. But the Knight of Pentacles in particular, and if you notice, you know, you see the knight with the horse on the horse. It's not one of those race horses. It's one of those horses that kind of, it's almost like when I think about the horses, that kind of takes you on a short distance or long. It's like one of those horses that they used to use to plow. I guess that's what I'm thinking, right? That's not what the knight is doing, but that's what the horse reminds me of. And then if you look in the background, it looks like farmland, right? So you think of cultivation, when you think of planting, gardening, excuse me again, you've got to be a very patient person when you're a gardener or a farmer, because all the work that you put in, you don't even see it until it comes out of the ground, right? Or doesn't come out of the ground. And so the Knight of Pentacles represents, when I see it pop up in a reading, depending on what the other cards say, you know, it's about, you know, being in it for the long haul, right? This is work that takes time. This is about work. This is about people and things that need to be cultivated in the long term, right? The sequoia tree is another image that comes up for me. The sequoia tree can grow and live as long as 3,000 years old. And so can you imagine how long it takes the sequoia tree to even reach its full height? And then after it reaches its full height, how long it, you know, stays in the ground for hundreds of years, right? And so when we're thinking about Saturn, we're thinking about, you know, very long-term lessons that take time to grow. When you are, notice, and I'll just go back over here, notice at the age of 27, think about all the growing that occurs between birth and 27 and 30, really. And then again, think about all the growth that occurs between 30 and 60. You're getting very close to retirement, right? You're also going to experience the years of midlife crisis, depending on, you know, what that crisis looks like for you, but just wanted to. So I'm going to go down the list of the words and phrases. I'm not going to go into detail about all of them. Some of them I may want to say more about, others I might just mention. But if any of them pop out for you, that's something that you might want to explore for yourself. So we've got the Knight of Pentacles, sequoia tree. So when we're thinking about Saturn, we're thinking about slow and steady, right? Slow and steady wins the race. We're talking about a marathon, not a sprint, like the Knight of Swords, right? That's the sprint. Cultivation, empowerment. Even if something seems like a challenge, but in the end, you should have these tools and you should be well refined or more refined than you were before. And it's very empowering. Should be. Saturn is about self-control, having boundaries, having the idea of work is associated with Saturn and the work ethic. Any insecurities that you have, Saturn can be placed wherever it's placed in the chart, depending on what house it's in, could be a sign of the air, you know, it could reflect where you're most insecure. Limitations, fears, a sense of responsibility. Saturn's a very, you know, Saturnian people are very responsible people. They get their work done, right? And they want others to get their work done. They want others, you know, to pay their fair share. You know? essentially. Father figure. There's a very hierarchy is a word that is associated with Saturn. So we're talking parent, child, employer, employee, teacher, student. Wherever there is a strong hierarchical structure, religious institutions, corporations, government, where you need more discipline, Saturn also points to us and points to the areas where we might, like I mentioned about the finances before, that Saturn might tell us, hey, you need to be more disciplined in your spending habits, right? Out here. Yep, okay. And building habits. And again, back to the money management, or, if you're, having to build some more muscle, maybe you want to be more flexible and start doing yoga. But Saturn is about building those habits, so what is it that you have to do daily to get yourself into the habit? I don't have any water. I should have water here. In the habit, of doing yoga, or whatever it is that you need to do. If you want to read more books, maybe you're reading a page a day and you work your way up to 2 pages a day. You don't want to overdo it, right? And say, okay, I'm just going to read the whole book. And then you never read the whole book because you just jump into the water without any, into the deep end, right? Saturn is about old age, status, structures, rules, regulations, as I mentioned before about COVID. Grow, mature, there are opportunities for us to grow, to mature, and to refine. Saturn shows us where we may have energetic blocks. How we approach our responsibilities, facing the reality of who we are. This one I think is very interesting. There might be some traits that we have trouble expressing, because we might not like that part of ourselves, or we haven't really gotten to know that part of ourselves very well. And Saturn can help us figure out what those areas are. So that is not everything, but really, I think, a pretty good overview of Saturn. And as the reading that I'm going to do in the next video indicates what are the opportunities and what are the gifts in these challenges that are presented to us through Saturn. And so if you want to know where Saturn is in your chart, there are free online astro chart generators, and I'll share a couple of them with you in a moment. I went into my astrological chart. I have to go in there again because there might be other places where Saturn might be. I'm not sure, but these are the ones I pulled out. So as you know, I have Saturn in Taurus. Everyone has Saturn. We all have Saturn in different places, and some of us have more Saturn than others. I have Saturn in Taurus, Saturn sextile ascendant, Venus opposition Saturn, Sun opposition Saturn, and 11th house in Saturn. And so my job would be to do a little investigation to find out, and the reason why I'm sharing this with you is so that you can do this yourself. The beauty of the internet is that there's so much information at our disposal, and I would never recommend that. And I notice I'm not recommending any websites for you to go to. I want you to explore as many websites as possible. You should be reading. So for example, my Saturn is in Taurus. I'm going to go online and I'm going to read numerous, I'm going to read information on several sites, like 5 sites, maybe at the very least, because I'll be looking for a pattern and ensuring that the information that I'm getting is accurate. And we don't want to just put any web page, obviously, a reputable one, but you want to find out what Saturn and Taurus means. Then you want to look for Saturn sextile ascendant. You can Google it right into Google it, and information will pop up about what Saturn sextile ascendant means. Notice too, you will notice that there are different types of astrology, the Vedic astrology, you have all these different, so be aware of that too, but don't not read what, if you're, some people might what, maybe you just are into Vedic astrology, then you use the information from those sites. But just kind of read as much as you can and get a sense of what it means in your chart. And then based on what I was telling you, based on what you're learning about where Saturn is in your chart, are they challenges? Are they gifts? Are they, what if there are challenges? And there might be some areas where Saturn's in that doesn't present a challenge at all. That's fine. That's great, right? But you're going to have some instances where Saturn is in a place where it can cause, a bump, right, in the road. So what do you do with that, right? Are you doomed forever? No, it's just information, right? Okay, now that I know that I have this tendency, right, to shut myself off from people, I have a tendency to not put myself out there and be sociable with people, and it's creating a problem for me. What can I do about it? Because my placement is showing that this is an issue, and I'm looking at my life and I admit it is an issue. What am I going to do about it? What is the opportunity and the gift in me learning this information? Right? Tarot can ask the cards, okay, so what can I do about it so that to make my life better, to empower me so that I live a more fruitful life? And tarot will give you some information about it, right? You can also get more information about it through astrology, but again, tarot is my base, right? But astrology can give you that information too. So Saturn is all about, did I learn the lesson? So if you decide that you want to find out where Saturn is in your chart, then, so I'm going to actually, I was going to bring up the sites before I started this recording so that you can see, but I think sometimes people like to see like exactly how you get there. So I'm going to use a fictional person, Miranda, who was in Syracuse, New York, who was born July 17, 1980, and was born at 417, all of this information. So I have two sites that I like to use. You can get your charts for free here, but I like to use them together. Astrology I like to use because you get actual printout of information for each part of your chart. So it's a great starting point to figure out, okay, well, what does Saturn in Taurus mean? And I'm going to share that with you right now and show you what I mean. Notice I can get this already with Miranda. So she was born July 17 and 19. And she was born 4/17 and she was born in Syracuse. Syracuse. And I'm going to submit. And so I'll tell you what I like about this chart. I like this chart because it gives you a printout, like a summary of what these different parts, which is wonderful, right? What I don't like, what I should say, I'm not going to say I don't like it. What I like the least is, particularly for someone who is new to astrology, this can look very complicated. Like someone who doesn't know what this is, like, oh my gosh, what in the world am I looking at, right? But it is good for getting an explanation. So for example, so she's got the sun in Cancer, right? So if I scroll down, the sun is in Cancer, and then there's an explanation here about what that means. So for every part of the chart is an explanation. And some of you might not have a problem at all with the way this is laid out, and that's fine. For those of you who do have a problem with how it's laid out, we've got the other astro chart site. Now, what I like least about it is when you have to pay. I mean, and I guess it's not something I like least about it, because if you have to pay, you have to pay. And somebody does the work, puts the work in, so I guess that makes sense, right? But but what I do like about the chart that you get here, look how this is a little bit more simplified, it's easier to read. Sun in Cancer, remember, it doesn't have all those Roman numeral that can kind of go people off. These are the aspects. I like the way it's organized. They give you the planets, they give you the aspects, got minor aspects, patterns, and then you've got these other special features, and then you have the houses down. First house in Scorpio tells you what the planets are. It tells you what the house is. It's a sign that the house is in, and then you got the planet, right? So it all depends on what works for you, right? If you like this, or you like this, right? But I often use this particular site to kind of remind me of where things are. And then I will just start Googling, Sun in Cancer, Mercury in Cancer, Chiron and Taurus, whatever, and start reading the different sites. But if you don't have time, you can just read from here. It's just a good starting point to read the sign, that's the chart. So that's something that you can do on your own. I help people do this as well. So if it's something that you want assistance with, I do have service where I do kind of help you do this. And I'll be happy to assist. So we're going to start with Saturn. Oh, I know it's not start with Saturn. So that was what we talked about regarding Saturn. Saturn has a placement in our charts. We need to figure out what those mean. And then we can figure out the areas where Saturn is strong, and then also where Saturn's kind of pointing us to, you kind of got to get your crap together in this area, etc. So the next video, and I guess I should put this first, but the next video is going to be part 2 of this presentation, and it'll be a pick a card tarot reading. We'll be looking at some of the challenges, the Saturnian challenges that many of us may encounter or encountering right now, or may encounter in 2023. If it's a Saturn issue, then we are experiencing it right now. But what are the challenges? Not what are they going to be? They already are challenges, most likely. And what are the gifts and opportunities presented to us so that we can grow, so that when we get to our next Saturn return, we are ready to move into the next phase of our lives. So that was it for Saturn. After the pick a card reading, I will record another presentation about Uranus. We'll do a reading with Uranus energy, and then we'll move on to Pluto and the same thing. So again, 6 videos, give or take, for this series, and hopefully after moving through the series with me, that you'll feel more empowered to figure out, okay, what is it that I need to really work on? And maybe it's not just for 2023, maybe it's something that I need to be building on for this next Saturn return, right? Or Pluto return, not Pluto return, Saturn return. Saturn returns 2 to 3 times in our lifetime. Pluto, we're not going to experience because we're not going to be here. Unless we figure out how to live longer, much longer. By the way, I'm recording from the United States, and for those of you who live in a different country, you can kind of find this out yourself, doing a little digging. But the United States is moving into its Pluto return. I don't know if we're already in it or we're about to, its country itself is about to experience his Pluto return. And so I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to Pluto, just so you got to get a sense that it isn't just about the long lessons that we learn as individuals, but also as a community and as a group. So I thank you very much for visiting Peace Lily Tarot. If you found this presentation empowering, enlightening, whatever the case is, please subscribe to my channel because it helps boost my ability to be more visible online and it can pop up so other people can see them here. If you like the video, please add a comment that you think would be helpful for other people. Maybe you got something out of this that you want to add to what I said. Remember, this is about teaching, reading, teaching, and learning. So please, by all means, if there's something else that came up for you regarding Saturn, please include it in the comments. And if there's something that you're like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense to me, and this, or if you just want to say, hey, that was great, just feel free to do that. And again, I thank you for visiting Peace with Tarot, and I will see you on our next journey. Next presentation reading. Bye now.